And another challenge that was presented was Cheyenne Day Wilson being on the boys basketball team and doing too well.
As now they say, doing too much. Well, that story is good because we were with a system, Yace. Yace was one of the early systems that would integrate males and females. We trained every day. Cheyenne was we call a little disturber in class. So I had her at a teacher's desk. You know, she would come in from school and she would come do her homework, and then we would have basketball. And then basketball at that time was the hub. Basketball was the hub. It was Falstaff was the hub. It was like the basketball.
Heartbeats.
And you know, we had Olympians there, like, you know, we had the RJs, we had the Nemhards, we had the Wigginses, you know, we had everybody, you know, Dwight Powell, you know, Nick Skouskis, like the early thing, you know, Tristan Thompson, Corey, they trained there every day, and she trained with them. So you see like the video I showed you, you see her training. That is, you know, her training with Olympians at 9, 10 years old. So she was always the runt, but she was always the one that was formulating herself to be one of the great ones, right? She loved basketball, and I used basketball to get education. So you want education, you got to use basketball. If you want basketball, you got to use education. I always told her, like, you're going to squeeze the lifeblood out of basketball, so let's start now early. So, you know, in our early days, you know, we were on Yace, and then one day coming in the gym, you know, regular drop off. She goes into the locker room kind of thing, gets to get changed, and I'm about to go. And one of the coaches came to me and said, you know what, she might have to go on the girls' team. You know, there was some issues with some of the parents that they were saying, like, you know, as a young lady, she's playing on the boys' team, she's getting too much burn, and they put their child on these teams to get that burn. And she was, you know, the star of the show. She was infringing on their basketball enjoyment, for a lack of a better word. And, you know, we didn't really understand it. And on a ride home, the drive home, she was like, you know what, I'll come off the bench. And I said, hell no. You're not coming off the bench. You're better than whoever is in front of you, and you earned that.
That's right.
So we, you know, we shopped around for other teams, and I just said, she's so much better than the girls that we were shopping around for. And so that's when I started Sisters Keepers. So I started it with just her and some of the community girls, her sister, you know, and a couple other girls. And we had like a grade 7, and then we had, you know, grade 12, because it was just a bunch. So she was always playing up against them. And then, you know, little by little, we started to formulate that, and, you know, started out with one of my friends who I played football with, Greg Brown and Nisha Wilson. And there was a Hitachi Wilson at the time. They were the Wilson sisters, one of the great young players that came out of the system. She went to the University of Miami. He went to the University of Hampton, and she went. So he met her in Hampton. He's one of my good friends who I played football with. I said, I have some young girls, I need some help. So that's how it literally started in those early days. And then it grew, you know, to Coach Cachet, Cheese, Donrick. And then Coach Marlowe, who's at Crestwood, he was coaching for me for a while. Then he brought his sister and a couple other girls from Jane and Finch, and then we just kept on growing. Every year we just kept on growing. You know, I'd get the community kids. He had those 2 or 3 from Jane and Finch. And then, you know, we started bubbling. We started going in tournaments, beating people. We had 2 teams, and a lot of tournaments, we would end up facing each other in the tournament. So you would see me in tournaments sit in the center court because I couldn't cheer for anybody. Because I said, okay, I'm not sitting on either bench. And then, you know, that's how it started, and then we went into the Crestwood phase. So one day I was in the gym, and this guy, Randy Alsuerler, his son used to train with Coach Rowe. And one day he was sitting there, and he called me over. He said, come here. You know, Crestwood sucks, and my daughter's on the team. And she goes, your daughter, Cheyenne, should be on our team. And I'm like, and tell me about school. So I went away one day and did some research on. I'm like, oh, that's it's a totally different, you know, ecosystem. You know, it's, you know, predominantly white, very affluent, Don Mills area. It's a culture shock, right? And remember, I'm telling you, I just started changing attitudes from, you know, public school. So, you know, go send her to a different school. And I went back to him and I said, we need more. I have a whole team. They don't have money, and they need to be fully scholarshiped. And me and him danced back and forth for about 2 weeks. It went from 4 kids to 5 kids to 7 kids to da-da-da. And we did that dance for a while. And then one day he came to me and says, you know what do you need? I said, I need coaches and everything. And he goes, okay, because I'm talking to Coach Rowe about the same thing. I said, so we just bring a whole program there. So me and Coach Rowe spoke. And then, you know, I went in and had a meeting with the headmaster, Mr. Bagano. And he said, he's saying, this guy's saying, you're the real deal, blah, blah, blah. Coach Rowe's the real deal. So we danced with that conversation for 2-3 weeks. And he said, okay, you have to work here. And I said, I can't do that. I was in my full-time job with the city. I couldn't just drop that, you know. I said, but I can come and help out. He said, well, if you don't do it, you got to find somebody. So I remember, you know, going back to Marlowe because he had just finished school. I think at the time he was a supply teacher with the Toronto District School Board. And I said, hey, there's a coach that coaches with us who's also a teacher. How can we make that happen? And he says, okay, that'd be great. So I danced for about 2-3 weeks back and forth with Marlowe. And Marlowe, and I understood too at the time, he was like, hey, I'm just right there. I can, at any minute in the Jane and Finch blackmail, I'm in the classroom almost every day. Because somebody's missing, somebody can't show up to work, whatever the issues are. I don't want to lose this opportunity. And I went back and forth, and he was like, yeah. And then I ain't gonna lie, like I remember one time in the conversation, I didn't hear from him for like 3 days.
Yes, because what a dilemma, right?
Like there's a time limit. He kept on saying, Patrick, if you don't do it, I mean, if he doesn't do it, you have to do it. And I ain't gonna lie, and, you know, I called Huggy. I called Coach Rowe. I'm like, can you call Marlowe and let him know what a great opportunity it is? And at that time, Wayne Dawkins was my good friend. He did phase 1. And he had reminded me about how he was able to take a sabbatical.
Oh, yes. Yes, the leave, yes.
I never knew about it, but I remember him telling me about it. So when this was going on, I called Huggy and Coach Rowe, like, you know, tell him he could pause it, you know. We went back and forth. And eventually, by the time we were done, we had like, I want to say 16 kids, 2 staff. Coach Rowe had like 3-4 staff. They probably, like you know, at times have like guesstimated the amount of money. It was probably $2-3 million worth of scholarship and full-time staff. Like when you look at all the travel and everything included. At that time, I was with Adidas, so I told Adidas what's going on. I said, we need support. So Adidas said, okay, we'll suit you guys out, because so we were able to support that school. Jay Addison got some stuff. TRC at the time got some stuff. Sault Ste. Marie, they just were giving me so much stuff. I had to open up 2 container storages, because every week they were dropping stuff off. So everything just came around at the same time. And it was, as I say, it was adversity that formulated Crestwood, because if Cheyenne would have stayed with Yace, we wouldn't have formed a club team, which would have formulated Crestwood on the boys and girls side. And then years later, you look at that team, and I look at, you know, I was speaking to one of the young ladies yesterday, or 2 days ago, and she was like, hey, coach, you know, I'm about to take my LSAT the second time. I got 126, and I'm going to take it over again because I want to get 150.
That's right. That's right.
Young ladies that came out of that program, one is a doctor, 2 lawyers. I don't even know how to say it, but it's an accountant. The word is crazy. I never heard it before. Educator or something like that. But her job is to check the work of the accountant. Like, so everybody on that team of the 14, 15 kids that originally went there all got full rides. And it started as a wave. And the last group of Sisters Keeper kids that went to Crestwood was a year and a half ago, which would be the last girl that was on our team at one time was Toby.
Oh, yes.
So the whole, I always tell people, I don't put it on myself. Cheyenne's adversity forced me to make a decision that was for best interest. And from that day of her adversity, I left the boys' side and focused primarily on the female side. So my philosophy was, and we always talked about, I said, if the boys get 2, we get 5.
Yes.
Like as you see, when you see them, they look good. You know, we had braiding things. So the braiding concept came out. I want them, when they walked into a room, they weren't going to be stereotyped.
That's right.
So their hair looked good, you know, their skin looked good. So I had to deal with Johnson & Johnson. And Johnson & Johnson gave us all type of, you know, body lotion and cream. So, you know, we started to do little things like that when it wasn't, NIL wasn't norm. We were NIL'd out. We had Adidas and eventually Nike and Johnson & Johnson and Clorox and all those things. Those came out of this one young lady, adversity, right? And birthed a whole program. And At one point in time, I was getting calls saying your program and with this young lady's 250 million views on YouTube worldwide and reposted. It wasn't like that when, it wasn't Instagram and TikTok. So you see the advance of women's basketball changing. Women's basketball was here, but to take it to the next stage, to go down there as a 5'6", 5'7" guard, go to Duke and win ACC Freshman of the Year right off the rip, and played 75, maybe about 60% of the season starting. She came off the bench for the first bit, and not because she wasn't better than the person. It came out because coach said, this girl's been here for 2 years.
Seniority.
You have to beat her out of the spot to the point where she realizes. And halfway through the season, into 5 games, the young lady went to the coach and said, Coach, she's better than me.
Wow.
So coach never had to make that tough decision, right? And the coach called me and said, I was about to tell her, but she came and told me.
That's integrity. What a team play.
Yeah, so it worked for it. So that's the kind of the Sisters Keeper, Crestwood DNA of me really being really full. I never took a check from Crestwood.
Wow.
When I first met with the headmaster, I said to him, if you give these young ladies and the staff a free education, a free experience that they would never have, I'll do it for free. So all my interactions with Crestwood over the 4 or 5 years, all my resources,
Consulting.
whatever access, was always free.
Wow.
So, that's what led into different opportunities before COVID.
My goodness.
Hence here.